Hello 3Design Care members. In this month's video we're going to take a look at some pretty simple designs, but something that comes up quite a lot, questions on how to design, is a split shank. So we're going to do a split shank a certain way. There's many ways to do it. I like this method. It's going to make setting channels along the split easier. So we'll take a look at that. I have a new project here. We're going to go ahead and do a save as and name that split shank. And then we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm creating a ring. So I always start with a ring size builder. I'm going to keep this parametrically linked to the ring size builder as possible in case we want to change it later. So I'm just going to go ahead and set about a size 7 for now. And we're going to go ahead and place a center stone on this as well. So I'm going to set that at about 3.5 millimeters on the top offset plane. So you can type that in there. And we'll go ahead and validate that. So let's go ahead and build that center. Now the center can be anything you want. A stone with a crown or a nice fancy bezel or whatever you want. To keep it simple for this video, we're just going to create a stone in the ring size builder. So select it first. And we'll just use a round brilliant 1 carat for now. Go ahead and validate that. And we'll do a simple bezel. Like I said, you can build anything you want for your centerpiece, but we'll keep it simple for now. So I'll just go ahead and set up my center bezel. We'll go to the second tab and give it a little more thickness and make sure we pull the bottom down through the finger hole. So adjust it as needed. And I'll add a little bit of a fillet in the third tab, just a 0.1 to soften it up a bit. So go ahead and validate that. Okay, now we're going to chop off that extra bit hanging through the finger hole here. We'll use a crop and punch. So select the bezel and the ring size builder. Go back to the solid module, and crop and punch is in the special effects section. And it's a crop since we're cropping out the inside of the circle. Go ahead and validate that. Okay, so this will happen sometimes. Not sure exactly why, but if we undo that, select the curve first and then the bezel if that happens, and just redo the crop. It seems to like it better if you select the circle ahead of the solid. So now when you do that, you notice that it used up my finger size, my ring size builder. And I may want to have that readily available in case I change the ring size later. I can always dig through the history and find it. Here I used it in the crop and punch. If you ever want to bring something back to the top of the tree, the top level, you can right click it and make a reference object. That will bring the ring size builder back to visible at the top of the tree. So great little trick for you there. Okay, so we have that set up. Now we're going to go ahead and set up for our sweep for our shank. Now with a split shank, we can't sweep it into a split. There's no way to do that physically. So we have to think of other ways to do that. We could build a solid shank and cut a part down the middle. A lot of people do that, and that's fine. But like I said, I like this method because it's going to give us an easy way to set the stones along the channel as well. So what we need to do is build half of the ring. So I'm just going to think about doing 1/2 and then we'll mirror it all over later. So what I want to do is, instead of drawing this bent curve to match the shape that I want the split to be, I'm going to go ahead and use the curve I already have and bend it to that shape. And the trick for that, instead of drawing it all by hand, we're going to go ahead and create a sketch in the OYZ. That's the third plane that's normally hidden by default. So if it's hidden, you can still select it here in the Axes and Planes folder. Select the OYZ, click on Sketch. That'll allow us to sketch from the side of our ring. And what I'm going to do is take a NURBS curve and just simply draw an arc-like shape that's going to match the taper of my side of my band. Now you notice that I'm drawing it way bigger than the ring, and that's because I'm keeping parametrics in mind. If I change this ring size, if this curve is too short, it'll be cut off if I make the ring any larger. So we're going to give it a lot of extra length there, so we can change this to any size and it'll still work. So we have our curve drawn. Go ahead and exit out of the sketch, and what we're going to do is blend these two curves together. So select both the drawn curve and the ring size, and down here in the solid module curve section we have 3D curve from two views. So go ahead and click on that, and if we preview it, you'll see what we get. We get this new bent curve that's taking our flat curve and bending it to our arc here. A great way of creating 3D curves without having to move all the points by hand. So let's go ahead and validate that. The nice thing is it makes it really easy to modify this shape as well. So I can just go back into this side view, and I see that I need to bring, actually I think I have it drawn pretty much the way I want it. We'll leave it there for now. But if you want to adjust the curvature, you can. So if you want it to bow in a little more, just move that point in, and notice that the 3D curve moves with it. So very powerful. Let's go ahead and exit the sketch. And before we sweep this, if I try to sweep this, let me hide some of these curves for you. This is the one we're working on. Before we sweep it, if we sweep it with a single profile and a one rail or one path sweep, it's going to cause a problem because our profile is going to kind of flip over. Anytime you have a non-planar curve like this, the normal direction of the curve is based on that 3D curvature and not on the flat plane. So our profile is going to flip over. So it'd be better if we did this as a two-path sweep. So I'm going to take this curve I have now, and we'll use that as my outer rail by using move, rotate, and scale in the position section. I'm going to just go ahead and move it over how far we want the width of our band to be. I'm going to say -2 millimeters here. And I want to keep original. That'll copy the original. We have both curves, and now we have a very simple two-path setup. And we know exactly how thick it's going to be, and it's all parametric still. Okay, we still need a profile. I'll just go ahead and place that into a sketch. I just did a front view sketch, the OXZ. And my profile is going to be really simple in this one, but of course you can experiment with different shapes. I'm going to use a rectangle, and I'm going to go ahead and size it 2 by 2. And wow, I drew that exactly 2 by 2. So very nice. You can always type in 2 by 2. And I'll go ahead and fill it round with a 0.2 radius. A little less than that, 0.15, whatever amount. Validate that. And we're ready to sweep. Go ahead and exit the sketch. We're going to select our two rails or two paths. Left, right, doesn't matter. Launch curve sweeping. Paths are already filled in. We have auto orientation on so that they're lined up correctly. Second tab for the section, we'll go ahead and pick my rectangle. The position doesn't matter. We'll leave it at 0 since we only have one shape. And then we'll go ahead to section orientation and make sure that we set it on top of the curve. So a vertical alignment top. And we'll go ahead and validate that. So there's half of our split. So before we set up all of the micro cutting, that's going to make the piece really complex. So when we mirror it and try to Boolean, it's going to take a little more time to calculate. It'll work that way, but to simplify that, I'm going to go ahead and take care of my other half of the ring now. To do that, I simply just mirror this side to the other. Now, we're going to have a problem if we just do that, because we have these coplanar surfaces here. That's going to make a really messy Boolean. So to eliminate that, we just cut that extra bit off before we mirror it. So before you mirror, select the ring and the OXZ plane, and we'll do a cut and delete. Okay, so that'll chop it and make sure that we chop it perfectly in the center along the plane. It's going to keep one side or the other. You may have to switch it by clicking on keep other side. This case, it kept the correct side, so I'll leave that off and validate. That's just going to slice that off perfectly in the middle. Now when we mirror it, we have a nice clean Boolean. The shapes don't self-intersect when we Boolean it. So we'll go ahead and Boolean it together. So select both, Boolean and special effects, add by default, go ahead and validate. And now we have our split shank ring. Okay. So remember, it is still parametric. If I want to change this curve, I see that I want to maybe bring it out a little more. Get that split to go a little wider. I kind of want the bezel to sit inside there. So at this point, it's all personal preference. Okay. You can change your ring size at this point. Everything should be fine. I'm going to go ahead and hide my sketches again, and we'll work on the channel. So for the channel, we need to find a curve that goes down this band right in the center. We don't have a curve there to extract, so instead I'm going to extract a UV curve. Under the curve section, select the object, curves, extract UV curve. UV curve is just going to allow me to, the first step, select the face. That's the face that I want to draw my curve on. And then the second tab is to set up the curve itself. It's either going to follow the U direction or the V direction of that surface. In this case, U is wrong, so we'll switch it to the V. There we go. We get a line right in the middle. We'll leave it centered. Validate. Quick way of finding the center point of a surface, or the center line. So now we're ready to set up our channel that we can then use for micro setting. Go ahead and freeze your solid, your ring, so we can see the curve, and select it. And then in the jeweler's bench, we're going to do a variable channel. So we're not going to actually cut a channel. We're going to use this to set up our stones along this row, and then we'll use micro cutters. So sometimes my curve may end up being backwards, depends on the orientation of the surface. In that case, we'll change the starting point. I want my stones to start at the other end. If for any reason you're doing a channel and your stones come in upside down, especially on a 2-path channel, you can reverse the normal direction of the curve with the reverse button. So other than that, though, we're good to go. Just change the starting point if necessary. If it's already there, don't worry about it. Now my stones are starting at the beginning of the curve. I don't want my stones going into the bezel, so we'll add a margin also on this first tab. So from the start, I don't know how much to change, so I'm just going to put my cursor inside this box and roll my mouse wheel to add some margin visually. So I'm just going to move my stones down like so. Okay, so that looks good. Go ahead and set up our size and number of our stones. So the second tab, stone size, we'll leave it on increment and stone size. I'm going to say under diameter, we know that our band is 2 millimeters wide, so we need a stone slightly smaller than that. I'm going to do some 1.75 stones. So it's roughly a 2-pointer. So, and it looks like I can fit probably about 7, 8 of them here. So go ahead and add a couple more. Depends on the ring. So that all looks good. Now for the channel itself, on the third tab, we're going to go ahead and create the channel, and then we'll modify it for our use. So go ahead and hit create a channel. And first of all, since we're not cutting an actual channel, we're going to turn the groove off. And then we'll go ahead and set up our channel. From the front view, I'm going to go ahead and bring the bottom of the channel up about halfway into the pavilion, just below the girdle. And then click my little hot spot here. From the side view, I'm going to make it as narrow as possible. So like I said, we're not cutting an actual channel, but we're going to use this to cut our micro setting right down the middle of our stones. So just make it as small as it'll possibly let you, and then go ahead and validate that. Okay, so that's going to give us two things in our tree, the variable channel with the stone positions and an extra copy called elements. Hide the channel. That way we don't cut it twice. We just want to cut the element. We'll use the channel later. Okay. And we'll come back and cut this a little bit later as well. So if you want to go ahead and hide the element as well. Okay. So we'll go ahead and set up the rest of our micro setting and then cut it all at once. Let's go ahead and create another stone right in the center of the screen. It doesn't matter what size you create it. You can change the color, whatever you want. Just go ahead and create any stone because we're going to set that in our variable channel. So select the stone, select the variable channel that we hid in the tree as the stone positions, and then jeweling. And there's our stones. So by setting the stones, it'll make it easier to set up the rest of our micro setting. So let's do that next. Go ahead and select the variable channel, highlight it in the tree. It's hidden, but you can still use it. And we'll go ahead and do our micro setting. Micro setting is in the prong section of the jeweler's bench. Okay, so when you click on this tool, nothing happens because it's missing one thing. We need a cross section, the shape of those micro cuts that we're going to make. So to do that, we could draw a shape, or I'm just going to use one, my favorite one here in the library. If you click the book icon, in the 2D section, there's a shield in and a shield out. We want the shield out shape. That'll give us that nice U-pave look. Double click that, and now you should start to see your cuts forming. Also on this first tab, we can decide to cut between the stones. This is the smaller cut here, or on top of the stones. That's the larger cut that cuts the nice gallery U shape. So let's do on stones first. The second tab is all about just setting up the thickness and width of that cut. So again, I'll use my little shortcut hotspot there, and we can adjust how much we want to cut out there, how deep as well. So there's some other adjustments that you can make, but for a simple cut like this, we'll leave it just like that. Go ahead and validate. That's going to give us a set of cutters to cut our micro cuts. Okay, for the in-between stones, we just need to run the tool again. Select the variable channel from the tree. Back to the micro setting in the jeweler's bench, prongs. Go ahead and use the library to select that same shield shape. You can always use different shapes and mix and match, do different shapes for the different cuts. But I'll keep it simple and use the same shield shape. And we'll leave it between the stones. This is going to give us our smaller cut that's going to split the prongs. So we'll go ahead and check the thickness and size of those cuts as well. So second tab, hit our little hot spot here. And we see that my bezel's in the way. We can go ahead and hide that so I can see a little clearer. And just check to make sure that our cuts are tall enough to go outside of the band, and then how deep you want them to go. If it's too deep, you may want to make these a little shallower. You can raise them up completely by pulling up on the center handle. Again, there's some other adjustments and angles you can play with, but for a simple basic cut, we'll leave the rest default. Go ahead and validate that. So there's our series of cuts. Go ahead and unhide your element from the tree. That's the cut down the middle. And then we just need to mirror all these items to the other sides. So switch back to the solid module. I'm going to mirror these. I don't want to do them in entire groups because that'll make the Boolean operation a little heavier. So I'll do the two micro settings, mirror that to one side, select them again, and the mirror, and mirror that to the opposite side. Okay. If it doesn't pick the correct plane, you may have to change the plane here. That's the OXZ. We should see something like that. Validate. Okay. And we'll do the same thing with my center cut using that channel piece. Mirror to one side, select both, mirror to the other side. That time it picked the right plane, so good to go. And unfreeze our Boolean operation, that's the split shank. And you're ready to start cutting away those slices here, those little cuts across the bands. So I'm going to select the ring first. Actually, when I take a closer look at this, make sure that when we crisscross down here at the bottom, we're really careful, because if we're cutting too far, we're going to cut into the other side of our shank. So we need to take care of that first. And to do that, let's see, the best way would be, let's just make the channel a little shorter for now. We could undo the Boolean and cut these individually, one side and then the other. Like I said, I want to keep this simple for finishing it up at the end here. So nice thing is I have my variable channel hidden in the tree. Just double click it. I'm going to go ahead and set the number of stones back down a little bit to 6. Recompute. There we go. So I went a little too far. Let's see, we might be able to fit one more. Perfect. Like I said, I can add that 8th one, maybe shorten my cutters so they're just outside the walls. So you can definitely play around with it and experiment with that and try different approaches. So we're ready to cut. We're going to cut all of my slices first, the micro settings, Boolean subtract, make sure that the ring is the first thing in the list. That's what we're keeping. Validate that. All right, nice quick Boolean here. Now we just need to cut this channel portion down the middle to split the prongs in that direction. So another Boolean, make sure that our Boolean operation, our shank, is on the top. Subtract. And there we go. So we have our nice micro set prongs in between each stone, split down the middle, nice shared prong setting. We still need to cut seats for our stones. Before we do that, go ahead and mirror your stones first to one side and then both of those to the other side. That way we can simply do all sets of stones at once using multi-cutter. So switch to the jeweler's bench. Multi-cutter is in the gemstone setting, and our multi-cutters will automatically attach to the stones. In the first tab, we don't need to change anything. It's all sized to the stones. Second tab, I zoom in on this here. One thing we'll want to do, zoom in on this side here. One thing we'll want to do is, if we cut it the way it is now, it's going to cut the corners off of our prongs. So instead of doing that, I'm going to bend that top portion over to match my stone shape. So just like that on top of the stone. That's going to just notch the prongs instead of cutting them off. Okay, on the second tab as well, let me freeze my ring here. You may want to adjust the height of your seat. By default, it sets it a little low. We're going to set it up a little closer to the bottom of our channel there, and then adjust the angles as needed. We should have a nice shape like that. Other than that, we're good to go. Go ahead and validate. Okay, cutters are ready. Let's go ahead and show our Boolean. Okay, so this is getting a little complex with this Boolean now, so I'm going to go ahead and save just in case. And then we'll subtract our cutters. Switch back to the solid module, select the ring first, then the cutters, and then Boolean subtract. Okay, that took a little while to calculate, but that's a lot of cuts, a lot of detail added. Freeze this here. So we see we've got our nice notched prongs, holes in the back, nice micro setting. go ahead and clean up our tree a little bit to finish up. So if I look through my tree, we have my stone, that's good. My crop and punch that I'm going to have to add to the rest of the shank. Okay, this move, rotate, scale here is that second curve for my path. I can actually delete that if I'm cleaning up my tree here because I've used it already. You can delete it and it's still part of the history of the sweep. If I ever need it, I can always go back to the history. My variable channel, if I'm done making changes to that, same thing. I can delete that. If I need it, it's still part of the jeweling. Okay, so my jeweling, my mirror, etc. Those are all stones. You might decide to group those together. And we'll call that accent stones. Okay, my boolean here is the shank with the crop and punch. We'll just add those two together. We'll go ahead and name that ring. Let that boolean. Okay, if that boolean fails, and it most likely will, we need to take a little closer look at why that's happening. I'm going to undo that boolean. Just right click the object and undo, or use the tree. If I highlight my shank here, we see that we have quite a sloppy surface interaction between the two, and that's because we're using the exact same curve to slice the bezel as we are to create the ring. Simple way to fix that is to take one of those objects and move it slightly. If you highlight the ring, and I'll just move that surface so that we get a nice clean overlap between them. So either up like that or down below. I'm going to think up above that surface. So we get a nice clean overlap. That's going to make the boolean much easier. So let's redo that boolean. I'm going to call it ring. Validate again. There we go, much nicer. Okay. So with that cleanup and finish up here, we see I have my main stone, my accent stones, my ring. Very, very simple, clean history now. I can go back through any of these steps and see how I created them. So I hope you enjoyed this video, learned some new tricks, and we'll see you next time in the Members Care videos.